Well, I'm excited that we are in week 3, our final week on our series, Milk to Meat. In this series, what we've been doing is we've been kind of asking this question of what does spiritual maturity look like? So here's the thing. If you're a guest in this room, you get a little bit of a pass. If you're still checking out this Jesus thing, hey, no problem. We're going to be talking to insiders this week saying, okay, for those of us who consider ourselves followers of Jesus, what does it look like to become mature, to kind of grow in that? And we use this framework found from this letter that a pastor wrote to some people called Hebrews, and this is the passage that we're kind of starting with. So let's take a look at this. He says, no one who lives on milk alone can know the ins and the outs of what it means to be righteous and pursue justice. That's because he is only a baby. Now, here's the thing. He's using this illustration, talking about when you're a baby, it's okay to only rely on milk. That's fine. When you first start off following Jesus, that's fine. But he says that's only fine to a point. And he goes on further and he says this. He says, but solid food is for those who have come of age, for those who have learned through practice to distinguish good from evil. So here's what the author's saying. As you begin to follow Jesus, when you first start following Jesus, it's totally okay. And this is what we talked about in week 1. It's totally okay to kind of be in a high chair, for someone to feed you, for it to be about yourself. If you've ever had a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, you know life is all about them, right? Like they are the only person, the entire universe revolves around them. And that's fine to a point. But if you're 35 and you're like climbing in a high chair, making the world about you and what you want, that's a little immature, right? Wouldn't we say there's a problem with a person like that? So in week 1, we talked about really what you have to do is you have to own this journey that you're on. And you have to take it seriously and take it upon yourself to feed yourself. So in week 2, we kind of asked this question. We said, okay, if you got to own it yourself, you got to take responsibility for it. What do mature followers of Jesus look like? What does that even look like to follow Jesus and to be mature? What does that look like? And we talked about that. And where we got our answer from this is we looked back at the Old Testament, and there's actually this prophecy. This prophet looking forward kind of said, this is what it's like. The followers of Jesus, the life of Jesus is going to be about these things. And we can find it in Micah 6. It says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So a mature follower of Jesus, what that person looks like is someone who does justice. It's someone who loves mercy. And it's someone who walks humbly with their God. That's what it looks like. And we realize, okay, that's the goal. That's the way Jesus lived his life, is to give us that example. And we want to take this question one step further. We want to go, okay, let's take one more step. And we're asking this question today. This is what today's about. What happens at a church with mature followers of Jesus? What happens to a room like this when we all get serious about this? What happens to a church when they get serious, when they say, I'm going to get out of the high chair and I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to learn to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly. What happens to a church like that? Because here's what we have to understand. A church isn't a building. Do you guys know that? Like this 400 Old Post Road, this isn't the church. Like this building, these chairs, this stage, this isn't the church. The church is all of you. Because here's the thing, there was a time that we weren't in this building, but we were still a church, right? When we met in Goodnight in the elementary school, it was still a church then. Before that, when we met in Texas Old Town, we were a church then, right? And even before that, before we ever had public services, but there was this group of people wanting to start the church, when we met in living rooms, when we met in classrooms, the time that, and the early team, I remember this, there was a time that the only place that we could rent out for free was the side room to a bar. We were a church there, right? Like the location, the locale does not determine if it's a church or not, right? It's the people. So what happens when all of you say, we are the church and we are going to get serious about following Jesus? And that's what today is about, is this question: what happens to a church or with a church full of mature followers of Jesus? And to answer this question, we're going to look at 3 different occurrences that happen in the New Testament. And we're going to look at that and see if we can draw anything from that. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about a blind man, a tax collector, and a demon-possessed man. Now, I get it. This kind of sounds like the setup to a really bad joke, like a blind man, a tax collector, and demon-possessed man walk into a bar, right? Like I get it. It sounds like, oh, I get it. Which Honestly, I kind of want to know the answer to that joke because I'm kind of intrigued, but that's not what we're going to be talking about. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at these stories, these interactions that Jesus and his followers had with these people, and see if that can shed light on what it looks like when a church, when a group of people, when a gathering of people get serious and become mature followers of Jesus. So the first one we want to look at is a blind man. Now, there's some things culturally that are important to understand when it comes to this story, and in particular, a blind person. You see, in the ancient Near East at this time, 2,000 years ago in the ancient Near East, people that were born with disabilities, especially someone that was born blind, the culture, the society would look at that person and say, that person clearly did something wrong to deserve this. Or they might say, what did this person's parents do that they might deserve this? And here's the thing, it's easy 2,000 years later to look back at that and kind of scoff at that and to think, well, clearly nothing happened. This is genetic. But don't we sometimes do that in our lives? We do something happens and we think, what did I do to deserve this? We kind of do the same thing, don't we? We just dress it up a little bit, right? When someone's praying for healing or praying about a situation, we got, oh, you got to have a lot of faith, as if that's going to change the game, right? So we, in our own ways, we kind of do this. But back then, this was really strong. And someone like this was looked at as kind of a drain on society, a drain on culture. They'd be pushed to the margins of life, pushed to the margins of the society and the culture of that day. Many times they would be outside the city gates because they had nothing to offer, and they would just have to sit and beg for all of their needs to be taken care of. So that's what's happening in and around this story. And here's what's happening. Jesus has this interaction. Then they came to Jericho as Jesus and his disciples together with a large crowd. I'll stop for a moment. So this right here, you have Jesus, and then you have the disciples, and then you have this large crowd following. This, you could kind of make an argument, this is like a church, right? It's this gathering of people, this group of people following after Jesus. So we're going to see what happens when a large crowd, when this church, in a sense, has this interaction with a blind man. So could we go back to that previous verse? I'm going to go ahead and finish that up. When they were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. So like we said, he's kind of by the road begging. And then we see what happens. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. So this blind man hears that it's Jesus coming. And he starts shouting out and he's saying, Jesus, have mercy on me. And what do we know about maturity? They do justice. They love mercy. They walk humbly. So this man's crying out, and the church is kind of coming back. Society and culture has kind of said this guy has nothing to offer, and it's kind of pushed him aside. So let's see what happens. So as the group walks by, many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. Now, isn't that interesting? That this group of followers of Jesus, their response is to rebuke this man and telling him to be quiet. They're, again, pushing him to the outside, saying, you have nothing to contribute here. And can we be honest? If we're really honest with ourselves as followers of Jesus, the church has kind of gotten the same reputation, hasn't it? Have you had friends or family members that have kind of thought about church in those ways? That if somebody doesn't have anything to offer, if they can't give a bunch to the church, if they can't do a bunch for the church, if they're looked at as one of kind of those people, kind of the outcasts, the misfits of culture and society, that they're not welcomed in, isn't that what happens many times? It just begins to raise this question, is that what it really looks like? Like, what's the problem? So, which brings us to the next story, the story of the tax collector. And again, some cultural background here on tax collectors, because I get it. None of us really love to pay taxes, right? I don't think I know anybody that's like, oh, tax time's coming up. Like, I can't wait to give away money, right? Or you look at your paycheck and you're like, you know what? I wish they would have taken a little more. You know, like I really wish, because here's the thing, they're really responsible with the money, right? Like they're super responsible, the government, with our money. So, right, none of us really like taxes. None of us really like the IRS. So we're like, okay, sure, he's a tax collector, works for the IRS. No, it's even worse than that. Because I want you to imagine something. Imagine you live in an area that's owned and oppressed by another empire. You are like on the underside of the Roman Empire. You're being oppressed by these people. You can't do what you want to do. You don't have all the religious freedoms that you might want. But the problem with Rome at the time, because Rome is the empire that's oppressing this region, the problem with that is it's so big, how do you keep your boot on that many people all at once? Like, how do you keep everyone in line and everyone in check? And they realize that one way that they do this is through the collection of taxes. The problem is if they send a Roman person down to collect taxes from this region, they kept getting killed. Like, that's not good. We got to figure out how to do this. So what they would do is they would get someone of the people to collect taxes on the people. So they would go to this Jewish area, and they'd get a Jewish person to become a tax collector. And here's how they convinced them. Because if they just said, hey, will you collect taxes from your own people? It'd be like, why should I? But what they told the tax collectors is said, you know what? This is what we need. And as long as you collect this, we're good. You're actually allowed, though, to collect as much as you want. And anything above and beyond this, you just keep that for yourself. So these tax collectors use that as a way to get wealthy off the backs of their own people. These were traitors. These were turncoats. These were the worst of the worst. The Jewish people hated the Romans that were oppressing them. And there were some of their own people, some of their own neighbors and coworkers that actually were in step with the Roman government, stealing from their own people. See, these kinds of people were the worst of the worst. Especially the religious people hated people working with the Roman government. So here's what happens when Jesus interacts with this tax collector. Jesus entered Jericho and seemed to only be passing through. Living in Jericho was a man by the name of Zacchaeus. He was the head tax collector and was very rich. So not only is he just a normal tax collector, he's like over a bunch of tax collectors. And it tells us that he's incredibly wealthy. So what do we know about Zacchaeus? He's ripping people off, right? He's robbing his own people. This is the kind of guy that Zacchaeus is. So here's what happens. He was also very short. This guy's not real tall. He wanted to see Jesus as he passed through the center of town, but he couldn't get a glimpse because the crowd of people that couldn't wait to see Jesus, that loved Jesus, that loved what he was doing, that crowd blocked his view. So I want you to imagine, I want you to kind of put yourself there, right? You love Jesus, you can't wait. You're like lined up and you're looking, you can't wait. And then up comes Zacchaeus, right? That's ripping you off. And he's too short and he like can't see over. And he's like pulling on your shirt and he's like, hey, could you watch out so you can see? What would your response be? I mean, honestly, wouldn't there be a part of you that's like, nah, I'm good, right? Like no way, man. Like, good luck. You figure it out, right? And that's what this crowd does. They're like leaning into each other like, nope, buddy, can't squeeze through here. Like, I'm not, oh, what's that? You're too short? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, because it's amazing out here. I mean, Jesus, he just healed someone. It was crazy. I'll never see that again, right? And he looks just so Jesus-ly. Like, I don't know, you'd be like trying to rub it in any way you can, right? And that's what this crowd does. That's what this gathering of people, that's what they do. They push this person back. And again, it brings us this question, like, is that doing justice? Is that loving mercy? Is that walking humbly? It brings these problems. Is that what a church looks like? Is that what we're supposed to do? Which brings us to the last story, the demon-possessed man. Now, here's the thing. I know what you're thinking right now. It's like, oh, it's my crazy Uncle Eddie, right? Like, we all have someone in our life that's just a few hinges loose in the old head. Like, but it goes further than that, right? Because this guy, the society that he was living in, they didn't know what to do with this guy. They kicked him outside of town. They didn't know how to help him. But there's one more thing that you have to know about where this story takes place that's really important. We're going to get to it a little bit later. But what's really important to know about this occurrence with this demon-possessed man is where it takes place. You see, the vast majority of Jesus' ministry happens on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee is this sea in Israel. On the west side, that's a very religious area. That's where all the Jewish people are. That's where the Pharisees are. That's where Jesus did the vast majority of his ministry. On the other side of the sea, or on the other side of that lake there, the Sea of Galilee, is a region called the Decapolis. And it's called the Decapolis because there was 10 primary cities in that region, Deca meaning 10. So there's these 10 cities that are there that are completely pagan. So they are not followers of God. They're not followers of Yahweh, don't have a Jewish background. They're like the other people, right? On that other side. And the Jewish people hated going into the Decapolis and rarely did. So most of Jesus' ministry, he doesn't go over there. But on certain occurrences, and if you read the Bible, when you do that, look for times that it says that Jesus went to the other side of the sea or went to the other side of the lake. Because what should be happening in your head is Jesus is going over to the other. So what happens over there is important. So Jesus goes over there, and that's where he has this occurrence with this demon-possessed man. So let's read here. It says, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. This is one of the towns in the Decapolis. So they're over in the Decapolis. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. So he's running up, this guy coming from the tombs, and we can continue reading. It says, he lived there among the tombs and the graves. Just a nice little tiny home there in the graves. Night and day, he roamed through the graves and the hills, screaming out and slashing himself with sharp stones. This is a guy that the community doesn't know what to do with. They don't know how to help him. I mean, his ailment has almost become his identity. What do we do with that guy, the crazy guy running around cutting themselves with stones? They just don't know how to help him. In fact, we can read this. We can read what happens. The way the society has looked at him, no one could restrain him. He couldn't be chained, couldn't be tied down. He had been tied up many times with chains and ropes, but he broke the chains, snapped the ropes. No one was strong enough to tame him. So the society, the city is saying, we can't help this guy. There's nothing else we can do for him. Think about this person. This is someone's son. This is someone's brother. This was someone's neighbor. And they've just cast him out of town. They just don't even know what to do with him anymore. So we can't help him. We've tried. So the question is Jesus and his faith-filled disciples, as they get there, the disciples are getting out of the boat saying, here we go. This crazy guy comes running at Jesus and the disciples. They go, Jesus, you got this. They're like stepping back. You know what the disciples did? Nothing, right? Like nothing about the disciples. They land and the disciples are like, I'm going to go kick stones. Jesus, you take care of this one. They're doing the equivalent of like the awkward person comes up and you think they want to start a conversation. You pull out your cell phone. You're like, oh, the thing in the app and oh, hello. Like that's the disciples right now, right? Like they are, Jesus, you got this. We don't want to have anything to do with this guy. We don't want to talk to him. We don't want to engage with him. This guy's crazy. I told you we shouldn't have come over to the Decapolis. See, Jesus, they're all like this. And we look at those three stories, how this gathering of people responded to the blind man, to the tax collector, to the demon-possessed man. And we ask ourselves, is that what it looks like when a church, when a group of people following Jesus, when they have maturity? And the problem is when we look at those people for our answer. You see, because at this point, at each one of those instances, they missed it. They missed the mark. And we know that because if you look at how Jesus responds, it's different. You see, if you want to be mature, you have to look at Jesus. And we look at his response. And we look at what he said and what he did. And that is where the clue is. That is where the answer is found. Because at this point, the people didn't get it. They didn't understand. They weren't yet mature. They were still in the high chair. They didn't get it. Jesus had to do everything for them. He's like, let me show you how this is done. So first, the blind man, the person that had been pushed to the margins of society, the person that had nothing to offer, the person that they didn't even want to talk to Jesus, be quiet. They corrected him, they rebuked him, they told him to shut up and get back. Here's Jesus' response. Jesus stopped and said, call him. To the person that everyone else pushed away, Jesus welcomed in. When society said, you have nothing to offer, Jesus said, I don't care. I want you to come here. When everyone else was saying, Jesus, what are you doing? They were pushing him back. Jesus said, no, I don't care. I want this person. This person gets to be a part of this as well. See, and I wonder if the church has been taking their cues too much from the crowd instead of taking their cues from Jesus. Church, we got to take our cue from Jesus. We got to look at what he did. So let's look at what he did for the tax collector. I mean, he's a traitor. Jesus, you got to understand some things about these tax collector people. They're not living right. They're making wrong choices. They're hurting people. Their actions are actually hurting people in our community. Jesus, we can't let those people in. As the crowd makes a wall of bodies not to let the person see Jesus, Zacchaeus, he actually has to climb a tree to even be able to get to see Jesus. We read that when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up into the tree and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. Now, here's what's amazing, because back then, again, we missed some things. Culturally, when people ate together, it was this sign of like acceptance, that we're family, we're community. It was this long process. Many times it'd be hours. They would recline and eat and then talk and then eat. It was a sign of relational, that we are together. And you know what Jesus didn't do? Jesus didn't go, hey, excuse me, everybody. Here's the thing. You might see me hanging out with Zacchaeus tonight, but I just want you to know I don't approve of anything he's doing, right? Like, I get it. He's a bad guy, right? But I'm Jesus. So, like, I want you all to know, lest you think bad of me. No, you know what Jesus says? Jesus says, I've got to eat with you tonight. Come on down. Let's go eat together. And I can imagine the disciples are thinking, Jesus, what are people going to say? What are people going to think when they see you eating with him? Jesus, do you not know he's a tax collector? We don't associate with people like that. And then Jesus is eating dinner in Zacchaeus' home. And you know what Jesus, again, doesn't say? He doesn't say, now here's the deal, Zacchaeus. I know you've been robbing some people, basically, kind of working with the Roman government. Well, we need to talk about some things. You kind of need to stop doing that. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to follow these rules. I need you to do this. I need you to... Jesus doesn't say any of that. He eats with them. And that's it. And you know what happens on Zacchaeus' own accord? Zacchaeus, after experiencing the love and the justice and the mercy of Jesus, decides on his own, I've got to change my life. Because being up close to Jesus, something just changed me. And what if as a church, we quit making people and telling people, you got to do this, you got to do that. If you can behave first, then you can belong. What if we let people belong before they behave? Maybe, just maybe, we'd be a little bit more like Jesus. We said, wherever you find yourself, you're welcome here. So you just come here. And maybe after experiencing our love, maybe God would change their heart. Because here's the thing. I know you're great. I know. You can't change anyone's heart anyway. It's not your job in this whole process anyway. It's our job to love people. And Jesus decided, hey, let me show you how this is done, disciples, because you've got it all wrong. You don't push them out. You bring them in. And then the third person, the demon-possessed man. This guy, of all the people, are like, okay, we want people in our church, but we kind of draw a line, right? Like, come on, Jesus, right? And this society who's pushed him out, who said he's nothing but his own ailment, he's his own issue. He doesn't have a name. It's just that demon-possessed, that crazy guy that lives outside of town. The disciples are in the back. They're like, Jesus, you got this, right? Like, I got this thing at this place that I got to, oh, look, the boat's leaking. Like they're just finding anything to do, right? They're, Jesus, you got this one. And Jesus, his response, as the man comes up, Jesus asked him, what's your name? Isn't that crazy? Jesus doesn't immediately start fixing the guy's problem. He says, what's your name? It's almost as if Jesus is telling us that getting to know people, that caring about people, that knowing their story is actually important. That we need to get into their lives. Does Jesus heal them? Does Jesus take care of the problems? Yeah, he absolutely does. But the first thing he says is, what's your name? Too many times for the church, for us, we just want to fix people's problems, but we don't want to know their names. We want to give them like a little bit of Jesus, but we don't want to get in their lives because that's messy. Jesus says, let me show you what maturity looks like. And what's important to know here is how Jesus goes about eventually healing him. He does. The people of that area, the people of the Decapolis, they're not big fans of how Jesus went about it. In fact, they're ticked off. They're mad. They actually kick Jesus and his disciples out of the region. They're running him out because of how Jesus did this miracle. They're like, get out of here. We don't want you here. So Jesus is leaving. So imagine you're this formerly demon-possessed guy and you're going, like I'm with Jesus. Like I don't know anything about this guy. I don't know. Think about it. If you had an issue like that and someone came up and healed you, I don't care like what you believe, what they believe. It's like, I'm with that guy, right? Like that guy that just fixed me, I'm with him. I don't know what he's about, but I'm about that. And this guy wants to do that, and he goes to Jesus, and he wants to travel with him. And here's what happens. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man that had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Of course. Jesus, let me come with you. I want to know more. I want to know about God. I want to know about you. I want to know about these things. And here's Jesus' reply. Jesus did not let him. But he said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how, he said, mercy on you. But Jesus, I haven't been to Bible college yet, so I don't know all the right answers. I haven't been to Bible college because there's not a Bible. Like I don't know anything. Like, Jesus, shouldn't I know some things first? And he said, no. Just tell people what you've experienced. Just tell people what happened when you came into contact with me. Just you go tell people. Jesus' response to this man that had this terrible condition was, just tell someone. That's what I want you to do. I want you to tell someone what's happened. And what's interesting is Jesus has ran out from the Decapolis, and he leaves and he goes back to the other side. He goes back to the Jewish Hebrew side, and he's teaching. And if you keep reading, and oftentimes we miss this if we don't pay attention, this is happening in about Mark 5, Mark chapters 7 and 8, something interesting happens. Jesus returns back to the Decapolis. After doing some ministry in the region on the west side of the Galilee, he travels back to the Decapolis, and he gets there. And when he gets off the boat, he's met by throngs of people. People coming to them with people that need healing, that people have that problems. They just can't get enough of Jesus. And it's crazy because those were the people that just ran Jesus off. So the question is, what happened? Why is it that when Jesus leaves, they're kicking him out? And when he's coming back, they're rolling out the red carpet? Well, the only thing that changed was a formerly demon-possessed man. You see, a once demon-possessed man changed an entire region because he simply told someone. He said, I don't know, I don't have all the answers. I don't know it all, but I know what I've experienced. And what I've seen, I can't unsee that. And what I've tasted, I can't untaste that. I know my life has been changed. You got to know about this Jesus. And what's interesting is something that happens right after that. You see, if you grew up in church, how many of you grew up in church? You've heard the feeding the 5,000. How many of you guys have heard the story of the feeding the 5,000? Sure. Yeah. Maybe you grew up in a church that had like a flannel graph, right? And they put the little flannel animals on there and the little fish and the loaves of bread. Anybody remember that? Yeah. If you missed that, you didn't miss much, right? So anyway, like we've heard that story, but there's actually another miracle that's very similar to that happens on the other side. See, to me, the more miraculous story isn't the feeding of the 5,000, but is actually the feeding of the 4,000. Because Jesus does this again, and he feeds 4,000 people on the other side in the Decapolis. You see, because of one man telling someone, there are thousands of people that are so hungry for Jesus, they're skipping meals, they're hanging on every word. And Jesus realized, I can't just send these people home. They're in the countryside. Well, we're going to have to feed them. And there's another miracle feeding of the 4,000, and that happens with the very people that had kicked Jesus out just moments before, because one person told someone. So let's go back. Let's rewind. We know what it means for an individual to become mature, but what does it look like for a church? See, in that verse that we were reading at the beginning in Hebrews, that author was writing this letter, and right before what we read where he talked about milk and growing up and eating meat, he really clarified what it means for a gathering of people, for a church to be mature. He said this, by this time, you ought to be teaching yourselves. Yet here I find you in need of someone to sit down with you and go over the basics on God again. It says the problem is, actually, you should be the ones feeding people. You should actually be teaching people. You should be telling someone, but you're not. See, the problem was they weren't, as a church, as a body, growing up. See, and what we find is this happened in pockets, and because churches get it wrong all the time, we get it wrong all the time. But what happened when Jesus left? Because here's the thing, when Jesus was on earth, his disciples kept missing it. You know, right? Like the blind man comes and the disciples are like, shh, get out of here. There's another instance where like kids come and they're like, kids, you don't have anything to value. You know, get out of here. And they shoo them away. And Jesus is like, no. Bring the children to me. You dummies. You keep missing it. Tax collector, we don't have anything to do with him. These people, and Jesus saying, no. Those are the people that get to be close to me. Over and over, Jesus is expanding the boundaries. Instead of arguing about who's out and who's in, Jesus just says, hey, bring him in. Bring him to me. He's trying to say, guys, this is what a church looks like. This is what we do. And then he dies and he resurrects and he gives them one final command. He says, now you go love others like you've seen me love. And they go, oh. Like that time with the blind guy, when we tried to push him out, you said, call him? Oh, okay. Oh, the tax, Zacchaeus. Yeah, because that's right, because that changed his life. And the demon-possessed man, I remember that. Like, they kicked us out, and then they love people like that. And it clicked for them. And then the early church started doing that. You know what they did? They went out and they told people. We can read in the stories and the history of the early church that it grew every single day. Day by day, people were being added to their numbers because they kept going out and they kept telling people. So what happens at a church with mature followers of Jesus? People that go out and tell people, it becomes a full house. Because we see empty chairs and we go, you know what? I gotta bring somebody. I know my coworker, I know my neighbor, my family. I gotta bring them. They've gotta come. Oh, they don't fit in here. Like, they don't clean up real nice, but they're welcome here. I'm gonna let them belong before they have to behave. They may not be doing the right things on Friday, but they get a place here on Sunday. That we don't care. Listen, it doesn't matter. Just come. What are people gonna think? No. You're welcome. Because you know what happened when Landon, my son, was really little? When he sat in one of these things? You know what I didn't do? I didn't say, hey, good luck getting up into that thing. I might feed you. Oh, I picked him up and I brought him. See, if we're all mature, that's what we do. We tell someone. Say, I know what it means to do justice, to love mercy, walk humbly. And I want to show others. I want to bring them along. You might say, well, Dan, I don't know all the Bible stuff. I don't know. Hey, listen, you're a step of ahead of demon-possessed guy, right? So if he can do it, you can do it, right? Like, the bar's pretty low. Tell someone. Bring someone along. And then we got to be real honest. We got to look around rooms like this. And if we start looking around, we're going, hey, man, all these people here, they just kind of look like us. We got to ask ourselves some hard questions, because if we're not attracting the kinds of people that Jesus attracted, we're probably not preaching the same message Jesus preached. So come on. Are we preaching his gospel or a cleaned up version of it so we get the right kind of people? See, we've got to be honest with ourselves. And then if we're not growing and things are kind of getting stagnant and stale, we got to be honest. You see, if we're not growing like the early church of Jesus grew, we're probably not living like the early church of Jesus lived. You're going to go, okay, maybe we're not telling people. Maybe we're not bringing people. Maybe we're like that church that letter was written to in Hebrews, that we're asking for things to be done for us. Jesus going, no. It's time for you to feed some people. It's time for you to bring some people to the high chair. It's time for you to get out there. So here's the thing. Here's the beauty of where this falls. Next Sunday is Easter. The crazy thing about Easter, even people that don't like church will go to church on Easter, right? Like, they're like, it's Easter. Kind of got to do that. You know, like, I give God 2 Sundays, Easter and Christmas. That's what I got. So they're like already, it's on people's radar. Invite them. Bring them. Bribe them if you have to. Hey, want to go for coffee beforehand? I'll buy you kolaches. There's donuts. Like, whatever you have. Let's go out to lunch afterwards. Bring them along. Because that is what a mature church does. It fills the place up. So here's how we're going to end. I want you right now, like for real, to get out your cell phones. Get out your phones. Go ahead and get it out. You won't get struck by lightning, I promise. Go ahead and get your phone out in church. And go to this website. Go to eikonchurch.com/invite. This will redirect you to our Facebook page for Easter at Eikon, and I want you to send invites to people. Like right now. And don't think that that's enough. You're going to need to actually talk to them. Like that's good too. Don't just send the invite and go, hey, I'm done. But invite people. Even right now. It's okay to invite people right now. Because if we say, oh, we'll do it later, I'll take care of it later, we might forget. And this isn't the end of it. Then talk to people. This week, as you think of people, go to this event. And listen, if you don't have Facebook, if you're not on Facebook, that's totally fine. We've got details up on our website. You can go to our website. There are multiple services to choose from. We've got a service on Saturday at 6 o'clock that you can invite people to. We've got 4 experiences on Sunday morning at 8, 9:30, 11, and 12:30. I'm tired just looking at that slide, right? Like we're going to do everything we can next Sunday to lean into this. We're going to do our part to present to do the best presentation we can. It's your job to bring people, to be a church that's fully mature. It's your job to tell someone that you just go out and you decide, I gotta let somebody know. Let's be that kind of church. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. God, we thank you.